Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Fish Friday number 140 and we have a good one for you today. Today's fish is one of those fish that I'm going to be completely honest, before I started researching, I didn't know this fish even existed, but now I am very happy that I know it exists because it is really cute, really cool, and really interesting. Today's fish that we're going to be talking about is bam, the Grunt Sculpin. Now, the Grunt Sculpin, or scientific name Rhamphocatus richardsonii. Again, that's Rhamphocatus richardsonii. It is part of the family Rhamphocatidae. As you can tell from the family, there's not a lot of species, especially when the genus has the same sort of beginning as the family name. If you hear some squeaks in the background, sorry not sorry, or at least Mrs. Ping is not sorry. She has taken over my office as a duckling nursery, so I have ducklings right next to me and they can be pretty loud. But regardless, let's get back to the video. The Grunt Sculpin is native to the eastern Pacific, about southern California to the Bering Sea, and it resides in a very wide range of habitats: rocky shorelines, kelp forests, sandy beaches, heavy reefs. It can kind of live in really any of those habitats. They're usually found in shallow waters, as shallow as 2 meters, about 6 feet in depth. But it's been found as deep as 165 meters, which is about 541 feet. So it's got a pretty wide range of depths that it can be found in. Now, if you can't tell from this picture, it is a small fish, very small fish. Its max length ever recorded was 8.9 centimeters, which is 3.5 inches. And all the research that I have done on this says that 8.9 centimeters, that 3.5 inch fish, was a monstrosity. Most of them are around 2.5 inches, kind of on the larger side, maybe 3, but 3.5 inches would be an absolute gargantuan in terms of this fish. It has a very abnormal body shape. It's got this huge head, this short, thick body. That head is just massive, though. In fact, the head is about 60% of the body length. So basically 60% of its entire body is head. They do not have scales. They're covered in these plates with really tiny spines on them. You can kind of see in this picture those spines a little up in here, but it's really covered in plates. So it's a little tank, just a really tiny tank. Doesn't mean it can't get eaten because it's basically just a bite, but they are still kind of armored. Beyond that, it's got this really long snout. Kind of looks like a pig snout, is what I attribute to. It's really got that sort of pig snout thing. They're usually yellow with these brown stripes going in there. They can be a little bit lighter, a little bit darker. Ignore that picture. They can usually be a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, but really what really sticks out to this, if you haven't noticed, is these bright orange fins. Bright orange, especially the filaments, the rays of the fins. They are incredibly bright orange. And if you can't tell, this is actually one singular fin, but it's separated from the upper lobe with these essential filaments. And you can actually see they're still kind of connected, but these are almost muscular fin rays. And it's really, really bizarre. Looking at this fish, you wouldn't think it can swim. You'd honestly be kind of right. It can swim, but it looks absolutely ridiculous. Its head points straight up and it kind of swims. It's not very good at it. It usually moves around by hopping, using these pectoral fin rays, these threads of the pectoral fin. That's really how it gets around. Sorry about the ducklings again. They're being relatively loud right now. Of course, as soon as I start recording the video, that's when they get loud. Now, in terms of what it feeds on, it mainly preys on small crustaceans, sometimes very small fish like fish larvae and worms, but it's usually on these small crustaceans, zooplankton, things like that. But how it feeds is kind of weird. It's not the interesting fact of the video, but it is kind of weird. And the reason why is because we've talked about different feeding strategies of fish in the past. Ram or suction feeding is fairly common. Ram is basically they're just bulldozing through a food supply. Suction feeders is when they're creating negative pressure in their mouth and they're sucking things in. This fish actually kind of has the physical features of both of those types, and it kind of exhibits doing both of those. It does seem to fare better with smaller elusive prey rather than prey that stands still. It seems completely counterintuitive, but that's kind of how it seems to go. Honestly, it's amazing it survives because of its horrendous swimming ability. It tends to attack prey much slower than most other fish and at a shorter distance, less than half its body length. A lot of fish are actually measured in their feeding efficiency by how far away they can get prey items. And that's usually measured in terms of the body length. So like, this is not a correct number, but let's say largemouth bass can attack something 2 body lengths away. That's not an actual number, that's just like an example. This thing is half its body length, meaning it's got to basically get 1.5 inches away from something to be able to catch it. That should show how horrible it is at just existing almost. It's got this really odd spawning ritual. This is just a bizarre fish. It's got this odd spawning ritual. The female is actually the dominant mate in reproduction. And what happens is she will find and chase a male around and then trap him in the crack of a rock usually. And she keeps him there until she has laid all of her eggs. So she's basically just herding and keeping this male in this very confined space and laying her eggs essentially on top of him until he fertilizes her eggs. Then the mating ritual is done. But I honestly do not know of any other species that the female is that dominant to physically contain a male in a place to spawn. Just bizarre. But for the actual interesting fact that we're going to end the video, even though this fish is just one interesting fact in and of itself, is how they survive where they do. When you think back to where I was talking about, rocky shores, kelp forests, sandy beaches, one thing those have in common is those are really high current areas. Just the Eastern Pacific in general has a lot of heavy currents. That's why you have a bunch of riptides and things like that. How does a fish who can barely swim at all survive in those extremely fast currents? And it has to do with one of their relationships. They frequently live in areas where giant barnacles are found. And within those giant barnacles, what happens when barnacles die, their shells stay. Well, barnacles need extremely high water flow to get their food. And giant sculpins, grunt sculpins, use empty barnacle shells as their primary source of shelter. They actually live inside the old barnacle shells. They use them for protection and very often for egg laying sites. A female will come force a male into these and keep them in there and lay the eggs in the male's barnacle. It's just truly bizarre. And this is actually how they often sit, with their face facing outwards from the shell. And if you're unfamiliar with barnacles, this is very, very similar to what a barnacle, in fact, giant barnacle. If you look at giant barnacles, that's fairly similar to what a giant barnacle looks like when it's alive. That's another way of camouflage for them. On top of if you notice, even though they seem, you know, you look at these colors right here, it seems like they would be completely easy to spot. But if you look at this, they actually blend in quite well. It's a truly bizarre form of camouflage that's actually highly effective. And the fact that their head actually resembles the shape of a live barnacle is just mind-boggling. But because of that, Grunt Sculpin have actually been found in many other things. Bottles, cans, ocean floor debris. These fish essentially mistake barnacle shells or this debris as barnacle shells, and so you can find sometimes Grunt Sculpins trying to make those sorts of things their home. This is the entire reason that this fish can survive at all. If it was not for these barnacle fish, these things would just be eaten all the time like popcorn chicken. Just amazing, an amazing fish, and I am so happy I found this fish. Probably one of my top 10 marine fish now. And I take my top 10 fish list very seriously. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. If I don't, please be safe. Have a great day. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you do. I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. If you'd like to support the channel, click the link down below. Regardless, loving all the support on the videos. The comments have just been a blast. Answering these questions, having everything, it's just been so much fun, and I cannot wait till Fish Friday number 150. But once again, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and